See, this is the problem. Like Emma was like, I have an idea. I'm like, oh, it's a great idea. We should do it. We should absolutely.
But we did
You're in Nashville.
specifically.
How soon can you get to LA? Should I come to you? Do I bring my camera? Like.
Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Gabe.
And we're
the Ghouls Next Door. Talk about spooky stuff.
As we do.
Yes, and it is a super special episode in
For
the
spooky
midst
times
of our other super special episodes. And that you get double dose this week because we have a really cool interview with some amazing creators in a film that is right up our alley.
Yeah.
It's like made for us. Just in that you, our listeners, know how much we appreciate horror media that is intentional and is aiming to combat real life horrors and educate people in an entertaining way, or as we call it, edutainment. And this film fits that bill perfectly.
Facts. 100%.
Thanks. So we are talking about a really great film called Take Back the Night, and we're going to be talking to the creators of it to kind of pick their mind on the creation of it, and also to kind of fangirl or fangirl about how we feel about the film. So I would like to invite Gia Elliott and Emma Fitzpatrick of Take Back the Night. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Yes, we're super excited. Thank you for, talking to us before the premiere of this phenomenal film. It will be premiering at Popcorn Frights?
Popcorn Frights in South Florida.
That's so cool. I'm originally from Florida, so I love it. So August 14th, it'll be premiering. This has been a film that has been years in the making. But like a lot of the films that we have covered where they're kind of tackling social issues, I find that this will be a question at some point. But I find that even though it takes all this time to either get picked up or created, that not much has to change because those issues are still very relevant. It's like, oh, this is still an issue. This is still a problem that we have to work through. And
unfortunately,
yeah. Yeah, so it's like I feel like we see that often with this, but I just want to introduce you all, and then Kat will give the brief synopsis of the film, so then we can dive right into the questions. So we have Gia Elliott, who is a writer and director and graduated from Belmont University with degrees in English writing, English literature, and entertainment industry economics, and is the writer and director of Take Back the Night. And we have Emma Fitzpatrick, who's an actress and producer known for The Social Network, The Collection, and In Time, and is the co-writer for Take Back the Night.
Yeah.
And Kat, what is Take Back the Night about?
Yes, Take Back the Night. Finding herself the victim of a violent monster attack, Jane launches a vigilante campaign to hunt the beast that tried to kill her. Jane's efforts intensify, but her troubling history of drug use and mental illness bubbles to the surface, causing her family, community, and authorities to question the authenticity of her account. Suddenly alone in her fight, Jane starts to doubt her own memory of the attack, to doubt if the monster exists at all.
It does. It always does. Because the monsters are real, as you all say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to kick it off with talking specifically, like you said, it was 4 to 5 years of development just to get this made, and now it's finally coming out. But I wanted to hear about the origin story of this film, like why this film, like what inspired you to make a film that was directly combating what we see a lot in horror media.
Great question. Emma and I have reflected a lot on our origin story, especially recently. There were a few, elements coming together at once. And, ultimately Emma and I realized we were interested in a lot of the same subject matter. She had been sort of studying and researching trauma and the effects of trauma on the brain, especially how it impacts sexual assault survivors. And I had just I had dropped out of law school, but I was in law school for a year. And in my year there, I sat on a bench next to a judge in the criminal circuit of New York City. And I watched a lot of these cases, get prosecuted. And so we were studying those things, and, we were just like discussing a lot of women's issues. And so we formed a book club to come together and read and, intellectually enrich each other in a group setting. And it was, I think, so addicting that we couldn't get enough. And we sort of expanded our efforts into writing. And, Emma is a scream queen. She's such a phenomenal actress. She's in some great titles. And I had made a queer rom-com web series that was distributed by Gunpowder and Sky. And so we kind of fell into a natural pattern of discussing these issues and thinking about how we might bring them to life in film. And it sort of was this organic process where, we were really passionate about the ideas. We would stay up late at night talking about them. We'd burn all our hours on the weekend thinking about ways to dramatize the story that wasn't homeworky and it wasn't preaching to the choir. We wanted it to be accessible to a large audience. We didn't want to make a documentary because we thought the people most likely to watch it would be people that kind of already agree with us and are already sort of naturally set to fight for those issues. And so we sort of settled upon this idea of just making it as fun as possible, taking a really unfun subject and making it as fun as possible. And we kind of thought there was no better way to do that than to make it a straight allegory and turn sexual assault into a monster. And so, survivors of sexual assault, people who deal with this topic, in their everyday lives in really unfortunate ways, could have sort of a moment of respite of being able to tap into something that is a big part of their lives and is important to them, but could potentially, hopefully kind of dance around any potential triggers and then provide a bit of catharsis in the end. And that was sort of our goal. And so we just kind of started writing it together and picked up a camera, started shooting. Turns out 2 people alone shooting is a little hard. And so the third producer, Kwanzaa Good, an amazingly talented filmmaker, jack of all trades. She can do it all. And so she was really the missing ingredient. And so we brought her on, and, the 3 of us, it just sort of snowballed from there.
Awesome. Yeah.
That was a great answer. I have nothing to add.
And now I rest.
She hit all the bases. Yeah.
Yes. I think one of the most interesting things about horror that people often just miss out on when they just kind of dismiss it as just being like slashers and like, blood and gore, is understanding that a lot of the time, these monsters are representing real things. And often it's people that are the horror, right? It's not really the monster. It's like, okay, let's think about this. And we appreciate when things are like, you don't have to think too hard. you know, it's right there, right on the nose on what it is that you want to know. Because people can be lazy with their media analysis, or I was like, put your media analysis glasses on and really see what it is. So I appreciate that you can sit back and relax and watch this film as just like a horror film and, get spooked and get stressed and be like super anxious. But you're also learning something. You're also like providing a space for like empathy and understanding for specific issues, and any like probably like femme presenting person or anyone who's had similar trauma can really like feel that and be put into those places. And I really appreciated the respect that the film took with some of these ideas and instances, and we'll definitely dive into to that as well. But Kat, I'm going to pass it to you for your next question.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned like your research end, and I was really interested in that just because I used to work in education, and a lot of what my research end used to be was how trauma impacts the brain. So it's like super exciting that like other people are learning about that, but also like using it in media, because I feel like lots of people try to make media that totally misses the mark or is like ends up doing more damage than what they were setting out to do. And this film like doesn't do, like, it was really great. I was pleasantly like not surprised, but like just be like, thank goodness, yes, okay,
Yeah.
happy that the stressful element, like in the essence that I remember when you mentioned earlier that like when sexual assault is like shown on screen, it's like reliving that like trauma, like it feels like voyeuristic and gross, and it was really refreshing to like not have that. But you mentioned that the justice system ignores the impact of trauma on memory storage and psychological coding, which I thought was super interesting. And like, what in your research of trauma responses and the storage of memory like helped influence this? What were your findings? That kind of stuff.
We particularly tried to make Jane someone that was equal parts likable, but also someone that you would be able to easily doubt or disbelieve, because I think the core of the story that we really wanted to tell was less about assault and more about victim blaming. So we, and sort of what you were just talking about, when we were talking about things that are the scariest, one of the things that we had landed on was just the horror of what it would be like to be someone who had the courage to go forward and tell authorities or their family or whoever that this had happened to them, or that an assault had occurred, and then just all of the myriad of ways that the system alone can fail you. And a lot of that is because people are not educated about what trauma can look like. And many of the reasons that people are disbelieved or disregarded, case thrown out, prosecutor doesn't pursue, it doesn't even make it to those points because people don't know that if your story changes, that doesn't necessarily mean you're lying, or if you can't remember details, or these kind of things where it does take education at some basic levels. And Gia and I have been talking about this a lot, just how that's sort of the first step to empathy, and that's the only way we're really gonna get any results in this arena, I think.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yes. Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you wanted to enter anything in, so I was like not trying to interrupt.
I have loads to say on the subject. Specifically as it pertains to the justice system and to law, the way that a sexual violence case is tried and the ways that the laws are written, the responsibility of proving that it happened falls on the survivor of the assault. And you run into loads of problems down to like where lawmakers have chosen to put a comma, or where they have ignored to put the word and. The word forceful is in a lot of these, and that's very difficult to prove. So, a woman whose fingernails are torn off has a lot better of a shot than, a survivor whose fingernails were not torn off, because proving that they tried to claw their way out of it, which is fucking gruesome. The fact that these kinds of things actually like pass out of the mouths of lawyers in suits is like horrendous to me on some level. And also, so because all the burden is on the survivor, you're suddenly everything that they do is up for either to support or cut against their claim. And the way that, you behave in the wake of trauma and the ways that PTSD affects your behavior are easily misconstrued, back to Emma's point, and that makes you somewhat appear to be unbelievable, and then your case falls apart, and there goes your shot at justice, which you only had 6% of a chance to start with. So if they're taking it to trial, so
yeah,
I mean, loads of things can be done in the writings of the law, but probably the easiest thing that could be done now is simply change. There's a lot of like really great legal scholars pushing for reform like this, but just changing literally the way that questions are asked to these people during intake would make a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kat actually had a good question about that.
Yeah, like it literally led really nicely. So like viewing the film, I felt very stressed every time the detective was interrogating Emma's character, Jane. And essentially how quickly the detective switched from calm and empathetic demeanor from the beginning to very accusatory and aggressive an approach to their interrogation. Very much like not how anyone should be talking to somebody who has been like attacked violently, in terms of like just like triggers and the fact that they've gone through a lot of trauma. Like that's not how, even if like, yeah, like even if it was like even slightly in question, like you don't verbally attack someone who's going through that. So it just felt really real for me. And what was your process in setting up those scenes? Was it based on like what you witnessed in your work, or was it just like creative freedoms?
Both. To write a lot of the intake dialogue where they're in the hospital in the wake of the event, we pulled a lot of like actual scripts that the detectives learn to read to them. Some of it got cut down at the top, but a lot of those questions sort of came out of that. And then, the rest was sort of a combination of things we had seen or heard, read about, and then also just sort of imagined, with Emma's got a lot of really great things to say about the ways that the lack of empathy in the justice system is reflected across a lot of different movements, and it just fundamentally fails the people it's setting out to serve. But obviously a very big problem is the conviction rate. There's a lot of pressure on the detectives internally to convict. And so they've got bosses, and their bosses have bosses, and they're all looking at cold numbers, not people. And, if they feel like their case is threatened and their position in the force is threatened, then, those personal factors bleed into their work. And so, we were trying to get at some of that too. Like maybe even the detective is under some sort of, patriarchal system of her own, and she's facing those pressures. And that's
I had read some statistic about how a large percentage of specifically women police officers doing these kind of intake questions are more likely to disbelieve a victim if it doesn't look exactly like their own assault, which I thought was very interesting. And I think we did try to write that into Jen's character, just a sprinkling of it, just because that blew my mind. That if the officer had experienced an assault in her own life, or I guess his life, but I think this was mostly focusing on female identifying officers, that they actually were less likely to take seriously the victim if they didn't fight back the way that she had, or if they, if they didn't have the right wounds, or if they weren't crying, whatever people think a victim is supposed to look like. So yeah, that was definitely woven into there.
And if that's not internalized patriarchal shame, not sure what it is.
Yeah. I definitely picked up on that. I feel like we're all in the same wavelength, because that was leading right into my next question, which was that I found it very interesting that besides like the monster, right, the mythical thing, right, like the thing that's like the horror, the real life like aggressors that she's having to deal with are women. In the fact that it's the journalists and the detectives, even the followers online. And I was like, I picked up on that. I even, in my notes, I was like, no one wins in the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think, so I definitely see that intentionality with a detective in that, like, it's easy to dismiss like someone else who doesn't look like the same trauma as yours, in that, there's also a defense to that too, of being like, you might invalidate what it looks like if you're not being like, if you're not telling the truth, or like, how dare you like, make believe. So I can like see that
gatekeeping of sorts.
Yeah. But with the was there also intentionality behind having the journalists be a woman and manipulating that, and also like the followers?
I think more so, and Gia, you can take this too, but I think more so we just didn't want to put any men in the film. Just from the get, so every character happens to be female identifying because we made a decision when we started writing it, like, that we didn't need that perspective. And, you know, like, let's take it to the extreme. I don't want to even see them in the film. I don't want to, you know, because we don't need to focus on that at all. It doesn't matter. So I don't think that was intentional in the sense of like women attacking women, just more so we were, you know, trying to show how losing all of these support systems one at a time is what leads Jane to doubting herself and doubting her own experience. And this is very true of trauma and survivors in every step of, no matter what step you are in coming forward or, you know, going through the judicial system or whatever. So these characters happen to be female, but I think it was more just about putting, you know, the reporter represents the media, the detective represents the judicial system, the sister represents, you know, your family and your friends. And those were kind of the touchstones we were trying to hit, just to show her unraveling and how important all of those pieces are to supporting a victim.
Absolutely.
I thought a lot of the, you know, female relationships was really interesting too. I really enjoyed specifically the relationship between the sisters. I just thought it was like a really nice, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but a really nice way to show like how people deal with trauma very differently, because they seem to have a similar childhood trauma experience. And, you know, the older sister leaning more towards embracing or trying to like gain normalcy in her, like her perception of normalcy by like leaning into getting like a real estate job, getting married, and like trying to start her life in that way. And then her other sister, like Jane, trying to like lean the opposite way, like realizing they didn't have like a traditional childhood and just trying to like embrace that kind of untraditional, in quotes, kind of like lifestyle. Was that like your goal with that? Or I just thought it was really interesting that, it just kind of showed that like people deal with trauma very differently. And that like what something that's like really big for somebody might be interpreted totally different, or their healing process might be totally different.
Yeah, I think that's a somewhat lovely side effect of us trying to write a very realistic relationship of sisters. And, you know, my experience with my own sibling is that, you know, you occupy the space that's not currently being occupied by your sibling. So like, you know, you'll have like the shyer one and the louder one, you know, so kind of just balancing each other out, but then sharing so much of the same fundamental big events that happen to you, whether traumatic or high highs or low lows, you know, for the majority of childhood, and then sort of just asking like, what are the different women that could kind of come from those? And that's sort of how we arrived at the sister relationship. I will also mention that Angela Goldner, the actress who plays the sister, and Emma Fitzpatrick, obviously our star writer producer, they have a pre-existing actor relationship where they've worked together before.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of the filming was done, you know, during the writing process, even where we would take the camera and go set things up. And so Angela came on board very quickly into filming. And so a lot of the scenes we sort of found organically. And so, you know, some of the nice texture that you're getting between the sisters comes from as a testament to the actresses and the performances that they've sort of created these characters. And then that sort of rippled back into the writing. But to your point, I do think that it is true that it, you know, it's sort of two sides of the same coin of different ways that people can respond to a traumatic event.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. That's like so fun that like it happened organically. Like it's just fun when like stuff like that starts to develop. Like you have like such an intentional idea that you're going in, and that like was the result. It like was really cool for me to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, actually like the process of having sort of an organic live wire that we're all dealing with, and then we're all trying to protect the allegory to the best of our ability and make sure that we honor it, but still have a movie that feels fun and has an arc. That was, I think, probably our biggest challenge, was being like the safeguards of, you know, those details that you're picking up on. So it's really fun to see you enumerate so many of them.
Yay, we got it. You did it. Good job. Yeah, we do this show. We've been doing it for almost 4 years. And we have found often that horror can act as like a tool of catharsis and help with people healing and kind of living through and having like an end and like an empowering finish to, then inspire their own kind of healing. And then on the other side, we've also seen some really harmful just tropes and representations specifically of like mental illness. I even think there's a film that Kat and I loathe. It's one of the few films that we just like absolutely abhor, called Contracted. Hate it. That has similar themes in that like there is an assault, and it's dismissed, and there's supposed to be authority figures that are like, not taking it seriously, but the creators also didn't seem to take it seriously or understand what they were doing. So it just was very gross. And so like to see like those things done correctly, like in this like way that just, it didn't feel like an attack to people who've already, have this issue. And so I kind of wanted to pick your brains about what you feel like in horror there is a lack of, or like that, just horror creators could do better to create, like similar to what you all are doing.
Yeah. Emma is like a glorified scream queen. I'm sure she reads a lot more horror scripts even than I have. So I'd love to hear what she has to say, what she would love to see more of.
Oh, on the spot. I don't know. I think there's a place. There's obviously a place for this kind of film. I'm actually I'm sort of a new horror fan in the recent years. I've been in them for many years, but I always kind of shied away from watching them because I scare very easily. And it was like more stressful than fun for me in the past. And I don't know what's flipped. Maybe I think too, like coming out of some of my first films being horror films, and I feel like I was learning to act at the same time, in the sense of like, doing a scene in an acting class is one thing, but like shooting a horror film for a month is very stressful and like physically stressful. It can be. And I remember after shooting this one, The Collection, Marcus Dunstan, who's one of our EPs on this film, he directed that, and that's how we met. But I think for months after, I had some form of like PTSD from shooting this film, where like the AC would kick on in my room at night, and I would, your brain just goes immediately to someone's in my house and being attacked because you've been tricking yourself into that space. So, sorry, I'm going such a long loop around this, but what I was going to say is I don't think I'm like an authority on horror films so much, but what I don't like when I'm reading a horror script or when I get into it is just the like torture porn, for lack of a better word. I don't like seeing people dismembered or murdered or whatever, just for the shock value. And that's just personal. Some people think that's fun. But I think I like horror more when it's on the thriller side, or when it's, when the story is just as good without seeing the gore,
Yeah.
So,
I think oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's funny that you should talk about like the making of horror movies, because that's also, I've been thinking about that a lot, as I set up my second film, and I just daydream about having enough money to provide better resources for the actors. So like if we're shooting on location, making sure that at night that they get to go back to a space that's comforting, like little things that I think could add up to make like the filming of horror, like more fair psychically, especially for the actors. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I do wonder about some of these like big movies that have a huge budget and then have, especially women, that like get put through the ringer.
Yeah.
I wonder how those actresses are being taken care of.
Well, I will tell you that, it was emotionally and physically exhausting for me to be a part of some of those things, but mostly because and this is particular to every actor, but that's like, I can't like pretend to cry. I have to like be fucked up to cry in a scene. So I have to like, maintaining an emotional space that is exhausting, just is exhausting. But one of the great things about Marcus Dunstan, and the reason that I will always jump and do whatever he asks me to, is because from the very first moment I met him, he made it clear that I was very safe. And that there was no time, even just safe emotionally. Like if I was ever in a space where it was like, I don't want to, I can't, I'm been pushed too far. I knew that this person was in my corner calling off the dogs and just being like, we'll pick it up later or whatever, So, because it can be traumatizing to stay in that space for a really long time. Just
I'm not trained to do that, and I could go there emotionally, and I too would trust Marcus Dunstan.
Yeah, he's just he just made it clear from moment one that like I was never out of control of my situation. So so then you're more willing to like, then you want to give them everything, you're just like, beat me up, take it all, because you're in good hands. So.
Yeah.
Gee, I really love your point. Like, that should exist. Like not maybe therapy, but maybe therapy, like just like things that are therapeutic for the actors. There's a long list of films that literally torture their actors for this idea of authenticity. And like, I would say like, I'm sure it was very emotionally draining doing this because you're Emma, you did cry in various scenes. It was stressful, but like, it seemed like I believed every second of this film. Like it felt very real to me. And I just was like, there wasn't any point where I was like, that's not, or like I personally, like whenever I witness inauthenticity, I feel physically uncomfortable. It's like a weird character trait. So there are movies when that happens, I'm like, oh my God, I want to turn it off. But I didn't feel that at any point during this, but I felt like it was really interesting. Like, I really love that idea because there's so many directors and like who do put specifically, like, especially women in positions where they don't feel safe for like this genuine fear response. And that's like, one, just not okay. Two, it is very voyeuristic in like violence against women. But I just think it would be like really interesting to explore the potential for that.
Yeah. There's some movements on sets. I forget what the role is called. Emma might know. There's like a sort of body movement choreographer, safety expert being brought in on some films that have, sex scenes or graphic, like kind of.
I think they're intimacy coach or intimacy expert. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a movement to start bringing those on so that it's not just like whoever happens to be the producer and director and you're sort of like at their liberty. And so I think that, there could be a lot done in the space just for the people creating the art, safety for them. Yeah. This all might be because Simone Biles. Maybe I'm just too moved.
Mental health is important. Especially when you're creating something so, personal and sensitive. And you want to do it in this way that feels authentic so that people can relate to it, but also taking care of people. I love that was, because people often don't think about like what goes into creating the content. And like, especially, there's the rape revenge trope in horror where it's often just, it's empowering because the women are killing the men. But it's like, okay, but they still had like that actor still had to endure this trauma on set and what is happening for them after that. Like even beyond what you're trying to defend in this film, just the existence of it is problematic, which is, why I really appreciate that that's not what's happening here. And because, oftentimes if we, read about a film where it's gonna, like a horror film that's gonna cover abuse in such a way where like already kind of on edge, like, oh God, don't be this, like don't do the thing that everyone does. It's just gratuitous. It's voyeuristic. It's just like we know, you know, like people know, people understand without having it right there in their face. At that point, it becomes a problem.
I also appreciate the lack of men in the film, specifically after like this discussion, because I feel like it does happen often that men feel at liberty to use rape as a way to build depth in their women characters or like their motivation. And it was like cool to just like not have that be a thing.
We sort of had this dreamy idea of, you know, letting the people whose story it is tell it. And obviously we're such a small team. We're really like exhausting the available immediate resources. But, you know, incorporating anybody who felt compelled to sort of participate in the telling of the story, giving them, you know, a space to do that. And we really did try to build into our days, like, you know, when we were formally shooting, like less sort of that discovery work that I was talking about earlier, and we were more on sort of formal shoot days, we made a real point to try to have built into the schedule. We would pre-scout and set all the shots ahead of time so that there was room at the end of every scene to ask the actors in it, is there anything that you would like to still explore here? Are there any shots you think that I should get? Is there any like gold that you see unmined? Is there anything, any more telling that you would like to do? So, you know, even if it's 10 minutes reserved at the end of every scene, we really tried to make sure that the days were scheduled well in advance to build in as much room for that as possible. Wasn't as possible on the action days, but on the dialogue days, that was, we got close. We got close to 100% almost every scene. So that was something that was important to us too.
Yeah. I hope you get this money, man. I hope it so that you keep getting this stuff. Cause that's just awesome. I am thrilled.
It's hard. Yeah. It's really hard.
Yeah. It's very underappreciated. So I mean, you know, people who are listening, please make sure that you check out Take Back the Night. I just have a general question of, you know, we often try to have like next steps in our episodes whenever especially because we're covering like, you know, heavy topics, right? Like we're, you know, exposing some of these like raw, terrible things in society. And we don't want to just leave people with this like open wound of like, yeah, society's bad. It sucks. Sorry. But, you know, we also want to have like actionable next steps or to kind of point them in a direction of like, okay, now, like, yeah, this is awful. Now, what do we do? How do we fix that? So what do you want like viewers to take from this film? And what do you see as being the next steps for viewers after watching this to be like, okay, like I understand it. That was like, you know, a piece of catharsis. And now I want to go and fix this.
It's an awesome question. Gia, what are your next steps?
Oh, man. There are several organizations I would recommend following. End Rape on Campus is a great one. Take Back the Night Proper is another really good one. If you are impacted by sexual violence in any way, I want you to know that there are resources available to you. RAINN is an excellent organization, RAINN, if I'm not messing that up. Yeah. Those are like the big things that come to mind, just sort of, you know, figuring out what's in your area and how you could kind of participate in a local level. Dolores Huerta, who, you know, is a huge civil rights activist. She says frequently, there's power in your body. I believe it. And so, you know, if you can find something local, if you're really passionate about it, showing up with your body is probably like the easiest, freest thing that you can do.
Yeah.
I want to add the Joyful Heart Foundation, which is Mariska Hargitay, the actress from Law and Order SVU. She does a lot of amazing work. And she did a documentary a couple years ago about the rape kit backlog. And that's her foundation. They do a lot of work specifically with the rape kit backlog. And she's gotten legislation passed and all kinds of things. So I would say like the goal of this film was just to open up a conversation and to make people curious. If you're watching it and seeing something that you didn't understand before about trauma or about victim blaming, I don't know, maybe makes you think twice the next time you hear about that friend of a friend of a friend or whatever. And I have taken to just really standing up for people in those circumstances, even if I don't know them, just like, hey, you might not have this information. And so before you jump to a conclusion about whether or not so-and-so is lying, maybe just understand that there are other factors at play.
Just believe women, right? Just believe them.
Yeah.
That's the start, right?
It's a good place to start. Yeah.
Solid foundation.
Yeah. You think it wouldn't be too much to ask. And then you're like, society. Kat, do you have any last questions or thoughts?
Yeah, there was some that we didn't get to, and there was one that I really liked. I just really loved that Jane's character was an influencer, and I thought that was a really great way to show how society's generally just judgmental. And there are even moments where the film really took me through realizing some of my own biases too. I remember when she went live, I was like, oh, that's a bad idea. And then I was like, but who am I to tell her how to process her trauma? And then I had that dialogue in my head. So I just thought that was a really cool way to highlight how trash society can be on a social media platform. What was the decision-making process for that? What kind of went behind the really awesome scene where they were on live and the monster was attacking? Those are just two really things I got really excited about. And I would love to hear how you came to that, what influenced that, and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. You had mentioned that there, you have topics that unfortunately will stay relevant for a long time. And when we were as you know, we've been making this movie for a very long time. When you don't have money, you need time. And luckily Emma and I were passionate enough to see it through all the way to completion. And over the course of that time, there were several inflection points, when Ronan Farrow's article broke and the Me Too really emerged. There was a lot of pressure, finish the film, we should get it out there, and now's our time. And it was very enticing to try to get swept away in that. But where I landed was, if you're going to make a film about an issue that you're commenting on, it's not because it's trendy or that it's in the zeitgeist. It's not your responsibility as an artist. And unfortunately, this issue will be evergreen for a while. And so we tried to just stay committed to making something that we were proud of. And a huge piece that was missing was sort of a confrontation, not to give too many spoilers, between Jane and the monster. And we had shot so many versions of it and nothing was quite working. And as we were editing, and social media was really the outlet of survivors banding together in reality, we wanted to sort of tap into that. And so we started peppering some of it through the film in ways that were just felt so right and clicked almost immediately. And then when we got to that scene, the one that you're referring to, the live scene, that we were sort of really plugged into that already as an identity. And then Emma surprised me. I was in delighted glee that, when we got to the set, it was ages after we had filmed everything else. And the second she busts out the phone, she does a online personality, a completely different one than Jane, the character that she had invented. And I was the most delighted I had ever been on our set. I was oh, this is a gold. I didn't even of course Jane also has her online personality, and so that was something Emma just brought to the table, and it made, I thought, so well in the film. I
will say that some of the most uncomfortable things to shoot in this were when I was going live or recording a video for social media. Just as a person, that was, and sort of what you were saying, Kat, about how you were why would she go live right now? I had similar apprehensions of just this feels gross. I hate how vulnerable I feel just being hey guys, what's up? It's just it's not me. But at some point I was well, if we're going to do this, I have to do what she would do, which is lure these people in with some sort of personality, I suppose. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of like almost like a found footage feel for those moments too, because it's like that's a real thing. Like you are, creating the media and you're giving that camera excuse.
Yeah. It's YouTube is the camera on Emma's laptop, and the live footage is Emma's phone footage, really.
Yeah.
So it is. You were right.
Yeah. And that just makes it even, more real. And that's why it's kind of like, oh, I feel like so much more tense. Because like this could be like, I could be tuning into that stream like very easily. I did really love the peppering in and just the community that was being built. And I, definitely caught on to that of like this, unionizing of them, of being like, no, like we're going to take back the night, and it made us wonder even like, is there a sequel? Are we going to see this again? Do we get to see them actively taking back the night?
Man,
we did one, we want more.
I'm so tired. Someone would have to really fund it properly for us to do it. And
is there
set on the beach in Mexico? That was 100%.
Is there the button on this one? Did we ever shoot with the guns in the trunk? Okay.
No,
I can't even remember at this
time
point.
If you want, we can still.
I mean, my hair looks like the wig in that last shot. So
it does. Yeah. There's still time.
Yeah.
Add footage. See, this is the problem. Like Emma was like, I have an idea. I'm like, oh, it's a great idea. We should do it. We should absolutely.
Yeah. But we did specifically.
How soon can you get to LA? Should I come to you? Do I bring my camera? Like,
we did specifically write that last scene with them heading to Mexico because we're like, if we pick this up for a sequel, we're shooting this
somewhere that does not smell nearly as bad as Skid Row.
Yeah.
There's no place more delicious than Mexico.
Yes. Yeah. And, I hope as people watch, and I'm sure at Popcorn Frights and wherever it lands after that, will feel as excited at the end to be like, I want more. Or even if it's not like, the sequel to this, that it's like a want for other horror media with this same intentionality where, we have people telling the stories that they should be telling and not, giving the same movie rights to the same people over and over again.
Don't worry, they'll still get work.
Yeah. But hopefully this will inspire, other filmmakers who are probably, in their 3 of 5 years battle of creating content to know that it's totally worth it and that you are making an impact in the horror world. And it's something that's super needed. So thank you both for working on this. Like we really, really appreciated it. I was like, this is so awesome.
Thank
so
you.
Excited it exists.
That's
thank
awesome
God
to
this
hear.
is recorded and I can go back and re-listen to that a couple times.
Just play it as a mantra. It could be the ASMR for you.
Yeah.
I'll go to sleep to it on a loop.
You are worth it. You did a great job. Do you have any last words for our listeners and viewers about your film or about anything that you're working on and where people can kind of find you?
We are also playing Phoenix Film Festival on August 16th and August 20th at 10:05. And I'm going to look, otherwise I'm going to get it wrong.
We are, I think you put the website up there, but we're takebackthemovie.com. And we're also on social media at Takeback the Night Movie.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I said that wrong. Take Back the Night, the movie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And then the Instagram's just Take Back the Night Movie. Yeah, we're playing Phoenix Film Festival as part of the International Horror and Sci-Fi Film Festival at August 16th at 10:05 and August 20th at 10:20.
Yeah.
Show up at 10. That's my motto.
Yes. Putting these in here. Take Back the Movie. Take Back the Night Movie on Instagram. Definitely check it out. To keep up as well, like follow so that you can keep up with what's going, where you can find it if you can't catch it at these festivals. And
we're just sort of gearing up, so there will be more. Definitely stay tuned.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And in our show notes, we will include all of the super helpful resources that you all pitched, so people can check that out to click into support. And as Gia said, just being there, one, understanding like what's going on, listening, believing, and then just showing up is honestly already, you're like doing it. Like you're already making a difference. You're already helping.
Protect Title 9 as well. I would just throw in last minute.
You said protect Channel 9?
Protect Title 9. It's yeah. It's a law that protects survivors of sexual assault, especially on college campuses, constantly under threat.
You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching the movie and for saying such sweet things. It's really nice to hear.
Yes.
Your thoughtful watch and your time is more than I ever thought I would get out of this film. Thank you guys so much for having us.
That's so awesome.
Yes, thank you both for joining us. Kat, you were saying something.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, like, Gabe and I have been watching a horror movie a week for the past 3-4 years, and this is what I love this movie. So
awesome.
Not that I am an authority on all things movies, but you guys did a great job, and you should be really proud of it. So
thank you you so much.
Yes, thank you for letting us pick your brains and learn more, and again, geek out about how much we appreciate it. I can't wait to see where it goes and what you all do next. We'll definitely be watching really closely.
Yeah, if you ever want to talk to us again or do anything, let us know. We'll be excited and ready for it.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Well, Kat,
as we say,
married.
They'll eat your kids.